Hello everyone, Irini Hara, streaming for a place of sun and full blossom, as the image in the background. I've been today for a walk in the botanical garden in Oslo, and it's so beautiful. So much blossom of magnolias and all sorts of trees and flowers. And as we are blossoming all over the continent, at least here in Europe, in many places, spring is already installed. Here is coming now in Norway. I got an inspiration to come to speak about something that I got insights for this topic from some personal experiences, but also from observing what is happening around. As always, I take my topics for these videos from real life and personal observations or experiences. And it is about this trend that I've noticed for several years here in Norway, but I think it's quite generalized all over the globe. And it's mostly present in the spiritual community. And reflect something that where I want to bring a different perspective, or at least let's call it a more trauma-informed perspective, as always. And I'm not sure if my perspective will again trigger some of the people that might hear this message, or at least will bring a reference or an inquiry to look into the reality a little bit deeper and also behind the surface, because this is one of my specialization. Go deeper, go behind the scenes, go into the hidden realm and see what is there that needs to be explored, that needs to be understood, and ultimately what needs to be healed. And it's again about healing. And an interesting trend that I'm observing for several years is that hunger. I call it hunger because I see so many people almost addicted to it, very present into and very active into this trend, is the hunger for all sorts of experiences of healing that we can get from other cultures. And when I speak other cultures and also spiritual movements or beliefs or practices, in particular, I'm referring to practices that either come from the Eastern world, like India or China, all these practices about the body, the yogi topics as a theory and also as a practice, or the Buddhist meditations, the chakras clearings and meditation and so on. Or they can also come in many forms from the Western overseas lands, especially South of America, or even maybe North of America sometimes, but most here, at least here in Norway, there is a very strong trend and exchange, cultural exchange between people living in Norway that go to Amazonian jungle or Peru, and then they bring from there people who are considered kind of spiritual gurus or leaders or shamans or whatever. And they bring them here for ceremonies and all sorts of healing sessions. And actually, I was in 2 days ago in a very beautiful gathering like that with people from this Huni Queen tribe. That is a very small village in the Amazonian forest, quite far away from the cities they have there in Brazil. And I got the chance to speak Portuguese again, as I speak Portuguese quite well. And the atmosphere was quite relaxed, and it was quite a big group, almost 30 people, and we just sang and danced, and we drank cacao. And some people also took rapé mixed with cacao, but that is not my specialty. I don't like it. So these two, cacao and rapé, are considered Amazonian medicines, and there are also others like ayahuasca or mushrooms. But I know many of these tribes coming from the jungle, they are specialized in brewing, in preparing, and also administering ayahuasca drinks. They take you on a psychedelic trip where you can face yourself and heal yourself to a certain extent. So that is what I consider a trend nowadays, because I see many people doing this kind of exchanges. Many call it cultural exchange because they also bring songs and all sorts of ceremonies that are also interesting and useful to assist to if you are into this kind of spiritual practice. But what I notice often, because in everything related to spirituality and to, in general, to healing, there is always a but. If you try to look a little bit beyond the surface and you don't get so much blown up just by the surface appearance of the ceremony and the costumes and the colors they have on their faces or the promises of healing and whatsoever. What I can understand that in this, that beyond this trend, we have to reflect on something else, and that is to which extent our interest, or sometimes it becomes part of life of people who want to have a spiritual practice, to which extent this trend doesn't expresses actually survival strategy. And I'm referring to trauma survival strategy as always. And I say this because myself, I've been into these kind of ceremonies for quite a while. Actually, before I moved to Norway, I discovered ayahuasca in Portugal, and I was in several ceremonies there. And then I started in 2014 my path into shamanism, learning and doing some courses, and also, again, going into some psychedelic trips with the plant medicines. And for a while, I was really convinced that all these practices are serving me, that they enhance my capacity to connect with myself and to release and to heal on a deeper level. And it happened that also I was extremely sensitive to plant medicine, especially to ayahuasca. And at a certain point, it became overwhelming to continue with this connection, because I was almost going into the trip even without drinking it. And in that moment, I didn't have any notion about the degree of disconnection I had in my body, and then also about my trauma mechanism, or what exactly psychotrauma means, and how many levels and how deep it can go, how difficult it can be to access it and heal it deeply. And so I did my experiences, and to a certain extent, I was doing this not because I was considering myself highly spiritual, but because it was part of my need to understand myself and to explore my inner world. And it was I was on a quest. And I was not aware of the risks of these ceremonies. And then I came to Norway, and in parallel with continuing with my exploration with other methods like family constellation, art therapy, and trauma therapy or somatic therapy. For a while, for the first 2 or 3 years, I also continued with ayahuasca. I actually did also cambo, peyote, sananga, and mushrooms once. And lately, in some ceremonies, I don't go often anymore to these ceremonies, but lately I also access the cacao energy. And cacao is now present in many different workshops and ceremonies here in Oslo. Almost every circle, every workshop you are invited, every satsang or kirtan, you can also drink cacao. Of course, the one that is from a fair trade source or brought directly from the source from those countries or regions. They grow cacao, and it has to be the raw cacao, the one that actually carries the medicine of the plant. And then at a certain point, I stopped with the psychedelic medicines or plant medicines because I considered that I didn't need them anymore for my quest, for my questions, for my need of healing. As I found other methods, as I said, therapy, and I went deeper into traumas with different methods, and it felt that that was what I needed, and I stick with it. Nevertheless, I continue to observe what is happening with other people, and I also understood that many people who go to these ceremonies here, or maybe they can also afford to travel to Brazil or Peru and do them there. They have this very high hope that they will get very deep purging and healing with only plant medicines. But many of them, they don't understand the risks, or maybe some might understand, but I don't think that it's completely obvious to many that when you go with these shamans or people that come from the jungle, for them, these ceremonies is a way of being, and it's also a way of living. And they've done this for their own life, or their whole life, without any training about the nervous system regulation or about what trauma is and how it acts into the body. They might have this beautiful and very deep connection with nature, and they understand all these plants and the spirit world, and they are wise and experienced in this, but they don't have the modern knowledge, either because they didn't access it or just because they might not be interested and they might think it's enough what they already learned. And I think this is a big gap for people coming from the continent or from the Western world to fully trust that they will be safe in that ceremony if they do it with a guide who doesn't have this full understanding of how our body and the connection between body and psyche works. And there is also these risks that many people go on these trips just to get a trip, and it's like a wow experience. It was my first trip with ayahuasca. It was a wow experience, but it was also very cleansing because it made me cry like hell for a day and a night of ceremony in a moment where I was extremely blocked from inside. And that it was like opening the door for the fluid to go away and to wash what I was carrying, and it was quite heavy. But later, years after I did all these ceremonies, looking back and knowing what I started to learn about trauma, learning about myself also, why certain things happen a certain way, why I did react in a certain way to certain medicines, then I started to understand more that some of those experiences in ceremony, they re-traumatized me, and they helped in purging something, but to a greater extent, I was not follow up after the session, so there was no real integration process at the psychotherapeutic level and somatic level after the purge. And that is something everyone doing this kind of ceremony should reflect on. If you are followed up properly during the ceremony, but also after, because the integration phase, it's extremely important if you want to ground yourself and get back to yourself and not stay somewhere out there, because many of us will actually travel in another dimension out of the body. It happened to me quite several times. So that is one risk that I would advise you to consider if you want to go on these trips and do these ceremonies, because you need this integration. The other risk that I also saw in many people, and that go even to just a simple cacao ceremony, is they will expect a lot of healing. And somehow, when I look around and I also see what is happening in the ceremony, I sense that many people are so hopeful that all these medicines from Amazonia, from India, or from other places, they will solve their inner struggle. And that is somehow like the ultimate solution that we have, returning to these natural medicines, and then we solve everything we need inside. And relying only on this kind of medicines, in my opinion, is not only unfulfilling, because we might have some expectation that at the end might not be really fulfilled through all these sessions and ceremonies, but they can also create what I was saying before, a survival strategy, because somehow the real work that needs to be done therapeutically, that needs to be done with someone who has experience and training in giving some insights and protocols, or using some tools that really support the recovery from the split that trauma creates, is needed. And so many times, from what I saw, people will go to these ceremonies with this expectation that there will be healing. And of course, when we work with cacao, we expect the heart healing, opening with more compassion, and so on. And there is healing, but it's not trauma healing. It's just the opening for the movement of healing. And I say this because I did this and I saw what kind of healing I'm receiving. And I can actually testify, even in this last, I'm very into singing. And I know that the voice has a healing power for every one of us, even for those who think that they cannot sing or they don't have a voice for singing. Don't expect that just the medicine itself, like a cacao drink or a song that is made by someone else, that comes from a different land with a different culture, that you might not even relate very much or not understand it, because they sing in Brazilian. I could understand. I sang with them. I felt that vibration of the language. But someone who only speaks, for example, English or Norwegian would not understand. Will get the vibration from the sounds, of course, from the melody. But what I'm trying to say is that putting your expectation exclusively on something that is given to you to drink or to listen, it will not go into that space where you finally feel I'm ready to recover those fragments. It will always put you on a kind of edge where you can decide if you want to jump over it or not. And that was my realization in this last ceremony, actually, because I sang a lot, and I'm used to sing and to use my voice to guide emotions and releases in my healing sessions, as I work with my voice for several years, and I actually received the gift from mushrooms, the gift of singing medicine songs without words. And I know the power of my voice, but in that ceremony with other people also singing with me, and of course with the people from Brazil, from this tribe, that they brought their own songs. The energy felt very good, and it really touched many sensitive fibers, and there was harmony, and there was peace, and there was a lot of smiles, and a lot of drumming and playing other instruments. So it was a very positive vibe. But my realization in that ceremony was that cacao for me in that moment was a secondary element. The first element that brought myself healing, and that was in reality a self-healing situation, was my voice. And that is valid for all of us, human beings. And sometimes it's about using our voice. Sometimes it's about just moving the body. Dancing can be very healing if we know how to access the body and stay with the body while we move, because sometimes we can also disappear in other realities while we're dancing. And then there is also other people can use breathing exercises or yoga or meditation or sound healing with instruments. I also use sound healing, not only my voice. But what we need to understand that we cannot expect from plant medicine or from a spiritual guide to actually heal us, because the healing as a modality and as a process stays in our hands. And our bodies are made to instinctively know how to heal. But when we disconnect from ourselves, and this is what trauma does, then we forget how to do it. We forget how to use our voice. We forget how to use our body in movement. We forget how many precious tools we have inside this body, and also in our emotional field and the psyche. And when we disconnect so deeply, when we live in split and in survival strategies, everything else outside might seem very fancy and very interesting to give us to the place of healing, to give us like a tool for healing. And we forget that healing is always available to us if we open to that skills that are innate to our human condition. So what I'm trying to say, if it's not yet very obvious, and I hope nobody gets offended with it, is that don't expect all these medicines that you have very little understanding of them because you didn't live with them in that land where they grew up. Don't expect that if they are given to you, they miraculously do all the healing work. Because in reality, they are just another tool that you can have. But the real healing process is harnessed, is performed, and is integrated by your own responsible connection towards yourself, to your inner states, to your inner mechanism of coping and living. And that's why I'm going to repeat. You can follow this trend that is very much present in the spiritual community. And I understand also why, because it, for many, it became a source of income, and it's okay to a certain extent, unless they go into exploiting those people they are bringing here, or going there and trying to take their wisdom and practices. It's a source of income, but for many it's just something very exquisite or different than what we have here in the continent, forgetting that there is much wisdom inside ourselves, and there is all this healing capability already inside. So it can become a way to give our power away when we rely too much on these medicines and the practices around them. It becomes a trauma survival strategy, because then we keep in that loop where we still hope for more healing, and that might not arrive, because then We continue to stumble, we continue to feel the same things, we continue to inquire about the same things, behavior and states, and feeling that we never achieved what we aimed for, the supreme healing state. Well, you need many years to really feel that you are healed, and you will never be 100%, because life will always find ways to bring more hurt and to traumatize, but what you do with what's happening is the most relevant. So my advice, if you want to retain it with no harm and no offense, is that you take a look to yourself and you ask yourself, why I'm so attracted by these ceremonies and medicines? Is this something that really gives me something that I need, or is just an escape mechanism? And beyond the exotic side and performance of those who create the ceremony and the masks or dances and songs or the trips themselves, beyond this, if you take all this exotic part, ask yourself, what is the real meaning of the practice or ceremony itself? And when you are out of it, when you go back to your home, if you prefer to travel there, what you bring with you? Do you come back to the same state you were before? Do you feel that you made a step ahead? In which way? Or you are just still navigating in some dimension out of your body, finding excuses or thinking, oh, it was so beautiful. I just want to feel I'm still flying somewhere around me because I'm still not inside me. So ask yourself this and feel if there are also other options. And also see if you integrated the processes that you open in the ceremony with these medicines well enough to continue steady in the other healing processes that might open in the future. For me, at this stage, after more than 12 or 13 years, I've been working with myself with so many different modalities, including plant medicines and psychedelic trips from nature, from natural ingredients. What I say, I will not go back there. I will actually stick with the later modalities I acquired, and every time I feel and I have the right environment to explore more with those modalities. Because in general, I'm not sticking to any trend and I'm not a follower. Even if I'm a shamanistic practitioner and yeah, I can follow a certain tradition or another, I'm always blending everything with my own inspiration, with my own creative spark. So this is something you can also do. Open yourself to also other modalities and see which combination suits you best. But don't believe that there is only one way, or that only because they come from the jungle or from India, from ashram, those people are the supreme authority over your own healing process, because they're not. Surprise yourself to dare to think that you have first authority regarding your own body and your own experiences of healing, because you already know, your body knows. Just listen. So I hope you can get something from this intervention. I speak from experience and from a different kind of understanding I have now after so many years of really deep work. It is your health, but it's also your life. So take both very seriously. Blessings of love and light, and I wish you a wonderful 1st of May and spring ahead. Bye. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel for future contents and notifications.